Welcome to the Black Writer Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman. The Black Writer Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. Rage Hezekiah is a New England-based poet and educator who earned her MFA from Emerson College. She has received fellowships from Cave Canem, MacDowell, and the Ragdale Foundation, and is the recipient of the St. Botolph Foundation's Emerging Artist Award. Her poems have been anthologized, co-translated, and published internationally.
I am always thrilled to meet the people that have relationships with Hurston Wright Foundation and to learn that you are one of our College Award finalists, and then to learn about your history and all the things that you've been doing since you first encountered Hurston Wright Foundation has really been intriguing for me, Rage. So first of all, I think I asked you off camera whether or not you identify as a poet or multi-genre writer. And so I would love for you to share just where you are right now in terms of your identity as a writer.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I primarily identify as a poet. I have started in the past couple of years to publish more prose. I published my first review last year, and then a couple of other little essays and prose pieces. I'm working on another review now. So it's something that I'm trying to kind of grow into more of like a multi-genre writer. But my first love is poetry.
Yeah, you have a couple of books out already, but today I know we're really going to talk about your forthcoming book, Yearn, that debuts in July. Pre-orders go on sale in March, right?
Yeah, thank you.
But I recall reading a little bit about your most recent book, Stray Harbor. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stray Harbor. And I recall one definition or someone talking about how you speak about water. And how these different metaphors connected to water. And, for those who are into astrology, my moon is in Cancer. I consider myself a water baby. I love the goddess Mami Wata, right? So I would love for you to just share a little bit in terms of talking about the journey to writing the pieces that are in your latest book. Not the one that's coming out, but the most recent from 2019. What was some of the motivation with focusing on water?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the poems in Stray Harbor really, the collection kind of explores the juxtaposition between feeling unmoored and feeling safe. And I love that idea of kind of being like the idea of being in a safe harbor, being cradled, being held, and then being astray, being a sea, being in this kind of like groundless, there is no land place. And so the collection kind of explores those ideas. And water has always been kind of a central aspect of my life. I've always lived by the ocean. I grew up on the North Shore of Massachusetts by the beach, and definitely a beach baby. And then moved to California and was a Bay Area person. And I live in Vermont now, and it's the first time that I don't live by the ocean.
Okay.
But I'm looking out on a pond right now. There's like lots of green space and lots of water, and I visit the ocean as often as I can. But
wow, when we talk about Massachusetts, California, Vermont, three very different writing spaces. Have you seen those different environments inspire your writing in other ways outside of this connection to water?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when I was in grad school, I used to joke all the time that my goal was to not write poems about birch trees, because I feel this. I'm a Taurus,
Okay.
and so like very much earth baby,
Earth,
feeling
right.
this like very rooted, grounded. I want to know like the name of every tree and plant. I have a bird feeder. I'm
I love
constantly
it.
like obsessed with nature and the things outside my window. And so that has always found its way into my work. I just had a poem that was published in the Cider Press Review called My Wife Was Right. And it's about my wife being right that these mice got back into where we thought we distracted them from. I was talking to my dad yesterday and he was just like, I really liked that poem. I liked the title of the poem. And we were talking about, and I was saying like, there are so many mice poems in my new book because I live in the woods now and I live with mice.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
I mean, there are mice in my life in a way that they have not been before. We have a cat and we have traps and it's all good. But
That's
I think
hilarious.
just getting into that awareness of like, having new creatures in my life that I'm like, oh, and how do I feel about living with these? How do I feel about killing these? So I think that has happened with all types of flora and fauna in all the places I've lived, for sure.
That's so fascinating. And it's funny. When I think of nature poems, I always think of Robert Frost, and I would have to admit that he's one of my early favorites. When I just started to 10th grade English, when you start learning about the classics and American poets, he's always the first one they hand to you on a platter. So I love Robert Frost, and I'd love to know who were some of those writers who have influenced you. I know that when you even think about writers of color and the things that we talk about, I really can't, on my hand, I can't even think of the ones that focus on nature and in the ways that that you're speaking as part of our everyday, rather than it just being metaphorical. Who are some of your early poets who inspired your writing style?
Yeah. I mean, the first one that I kind of think of that I latched onto really early was Sandra Cisneros, and reading The House on Mango Street as a young person, which is like more of a novella, but then every Saturday I would walk to the library and I would come home with like a new collection of her poems. I feel like I learned so much about what writing could be from her writing about the body and sexuality and her family and shame. And she was somebody who, I was in 8th grade when we read The House on Mango Street. And there were pieces of that book that were lodged in my heart that I still think about all the time, like lines and things. And so she has always been someone that I have really identified with, and who really helped me to start putting my feelings onto the page and bringing my voice to my own writing.
That's wonderful. I know that I was reading an interview you did. I can't remember when exactly it had been conducted and published, but I recently came upon it, and you were asked about your writing journey, and you were talking about at the time you were at a place where you now feel that you have begun to take risks with your writing. And I would love to know what have some of those risks been? Looking back now, you have this body of work. What can you say have been some of the risks that you're taking now that you probably wouldn't have taken before?
Yeah, I love that question. So, that whole joke about not writing about birch trees, I think that I started to realize in grad school that I was playing it safe, and I knew the things that I could do well, sonically and lyrically and with images. And I was like, let's just make beautiful poems, like, and there's, I care deeply about making beautiful poems. I want to make beautiful poems. But I think starting to bring voice to, trauma and violence and my body and my sexuality. I took a course with Reginald Dwayne Betts in my MFA program, and I remember him having us write a poem that we didn't want to write. And it's something that Toy Derricott talks about all of the time too, is like, write the hard poem. Like, what are the things that you don't want to give voice to?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more that I lean into that space, this new collection really grapples a lot with my sexuality and my journey with infertility, which has been like so secretive and shameful, and like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want this to be happening. I feel like a victim to this situation, and starting to give voice to that and say, like, the level that my desire is at is so uncomfortable. Like, here is how it feels to want something so much that it seems like lots of people have, being able to be transparent about that and give voice to it, even though, I want to lock it away and never talk about it again.
And being public with it. That's the thing, is you're releasing it, and then you now are showcasing it for folks to do with it what they will, right?
Yeah.
Have you encountered a moment where when putting together your book collections, where at the last minute you've had to snatch something out and say, I'm not ready right now to share this, and it may come out later in another collection?
That's a good question. I haven't had that experience at this point. I have had the experience of people that I love dearly in my life asking me not to name specific things that have happened in their lives that feel like they've affected me. I have had the conversation with folks just saying, like, that's not your story to tell. And I think that that's one of those things that I've heard so many writers face. But I think from my own experience, I am really finding just the strength of the reward that comes out when I am willing to really lay it all out on the table and be really transparent about my own experience. And what I find is, what comes back to me is people say, me too. And then I don't have to be alone in my shame and in my secrecy and in my unwillingness to talk about and to be with these hard things.
That's great. I know you've talked before in other interviews about your writing practice, and I'll be yet the third or fourth interviewer to ask you about your writing practice, and I would love to know, as when you share with different folks what your writing practice is it usually a new element to it? Does it evolve? Has it stayed the same? And I would love to know, how early did you even, could you say that you have a practice, as opposed to I write, but being just intrinsically aware that there's a practice that's involved, that certain things have to be in place in order for you to write? I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I have always been a morning person, for as long as I have conscious thoughts on this planet. Like, I wake up and I want to be in the world. And so my writing practice has always happened first thing in the morning. I think probably before I started to study writing formally, I I was kind of fitting in writing where I could. And I think when I was in my MFA program, I was hearing a lot of my teachers and mentors say, like, this needs to be something that you dedicate yourself to on a regular basis. You need to carve out time for it. It needs to be intentional. It needs to be structured. And, you know, structure and intentionality are two things that really work for me. So I started probably in the last like 8 years, getting up every morning, going to my desk and just doing something related to my writing. And it's like, it's the space where all of like the book promotion and emailing and submissions and all of those things happen too, all the like administrative work of being a writer, but also all of the editing and crafting and revising and typing up poems happens in that space too. And in the last couple of years, I have had just a lot more space to give myself that time and spaciousness to dedicate myself to it more fully, instead of trying to, you know, really fit it into this 1 hour period first thing in the morning.
That sounds wonderful. I know that is something that I have always attested to, is having that time carved out, whether it's like what you say, it's that time that you're on social media promote. I have my hands in so many different things, so I need to be organized in order to get it all done. And I find that with a lot of writers, that writing practice really is what differentiates you from someone who wants to write to someone who is writing, because you have made that determination that I am going to write every day, even if it's a sentence. So I want us to definitely get time in to focus on this new book that's coming out. If you can tell us a little bit about it, and I think you have something to share from it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for sure. So my new collection is forthcoming with Diode Editions. It's called Yearn. And the collection is an exploration of desire, kind of from young teenagehood to adulthood. And it's the origin of the book is that I was at a writing retreat and my friend gave me this book that she was like, you have to read this. And it was called Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein. And it is, it's just kind of like a deep dive into the lives of these young women. It's a nonfiction book, kind of talking about themselves and their sexuality. And I started really thinking about, you know, what were the messages I got about my own body and consent and desire and other people's bodies. I didn't come out as queer until I was 22, but I probably knew when I was about 14. So also kind of exploring like what was happening for me in those years where it didn't feel like this was actually an option, and how was I relating to other women at that time, and how was I relating to, you know, other girls and boys at that time. So, and then also thinking about, you know, the desire for not only pleasure as a young person, but also the desire for just self-abandonment, like the desire to just totally leave my own experience, whether that was through drugs or sex or codependency. And so thinking about and looking into that. And then, you know, I shared earlier my desire in this moment of having a family and the struggle with infertility. And so this kind of, you know, keening for a family and looking around and seeing all the people that seem to have achieved that. And so also grappling with the depth of that desire. So the book is kind of an exploration of all of those things. And
so that is a lot. That is a lot. That is a lot. So my question is, was this, you know, when you
even begin this? I mean, and then writing poetry. Is it all poetry, some prose?
Yeah, it's all poetry.
So what are you doing? Particularly, I'm thinking about where you say you're knowing that you were queer as early as 14, but not coming out till 22. So are you looking at journal entries? How does that process take place to prepare to write this book that seems to contain so many heavy topics and personal topics?
Yeah. So I am an avid journaler. I started journaling when I was 12. And
Wow.
so I do have, I have decades of journals that are all like labeled with the years that they cover on my bookshelf. And
Can
so
we say meticulous?
I
Wow. Now, was this you or was this someone?
yeah.
Was this someone telling you to do this, or you just decided to do this?
No,
Wow. So you were cataloging your work as early as 12.
Yeah, the year labels came later, but I was like journaling and saving them and keeping them and also just being in that, kind of like obsessive, nostalgic. I have kind of like always liked the time travel of like, okay, it's February 18th, 2022. Like, what was I doing February 18th, like 2006? And being able to kind of
I totally get it. I am that person too. I totally get it. Sentimental, nostalgia, all of that. Yes.
Yeah.
I love anything that's documenting and you can go back and I totally get it. That's so awesome that you went like that as a young person and you had your own process already. That's wonderful. So that I'm sure that was so helpful to go back and to see.
Yeah.
Now with these adult eyes, you can now process through.
Yes. And so informative too, because like, even though I have memories of my own, when I say that I like knew that I was queer at 14, even in my journals, when I'm exploring like, masturbation and learning about my body and learning about other people's bodies and all of this stuff, there's this fear with putting it onto the page that it's going to like become more real. And so like you can see, like when I look at my writing, I can see well, I'm having these feelings, but it's probably not what it is, like that kind of like immediately trying to discredit myself or separate myself from my experience. So that I think that's definitely part of how I did some of the exploration for the book. And also in the same way, keeping all of like my old love letters and decades of emails and all of this kind of pictures. It's like really easy for me to travel into old relationships and eras and things like that, and to have those kinds of, to write into those spaces of memory with a kind of curiosity and a willingness to name in this moment what I couldn't name to myself back then.
That's beautiful. Do you include any of those in the book as like photograph any of the old archival assets?
No, but I've been thinking about, I've been seeing more work that does that. I just read Tyree Day's Cardinal, which has a lot of photographs in it, and Diana Coy Nguyen's collection Ghost of also has like a lot of like art and photography in it. And I've been thinking about, just the expansive ways that people are using poem and photograph and art for future projects, but I haven't done that yet.
Okay, all right, but it sounds like that you have wonderful things to look at to remind you. I know when I was reading one of your poems in preparation for this interview that you also tend to play with how the words lay on the page. And And when you were just recalling how you were able to see and could tell how you wrote as a young person, that it was in a tentative way as to not make it real. I'm wondering if you find a connection when you are placing the words in in eclectic ways on the page to read your poetry. Is there a message that you're trying to convey to the reader in terms of, where things are placed? What is the intentionality behind that?
Yeah. So I recently heard, I've been reading a lot of like craft books, and I forget who it was in this moment, but I was hearing someone reflect on the space between words on the page being like a space for breath.
Mm.
And so I think that I really started to think about the words that I was putting on the page, and where do I want the breath? Where do I want that kind of feeling of expansiveness? And I think that this new book plays with that a lot more, and kind of asks more of those questions about where do things belong in the context of a page. I think I was recently listening to a craft talk by Camille Dungy, and she was talking about, how we just assume everything's supposed to be left aligned, and like, is that what the page wants? Is that what the poem wants? And I have really been thinking about that, like what, just trying to lean into the space of like, what does the poem want? Where can there be room to breathe? Where are the spaces that I can slow this down?
I love that.
I'm curious about that.
I love that, because what that does is it, in a way, it kind of makes it move from just being literary art to being visual art in a sense, because
Right.
it's, this placement, and it becomes very multidisciplinary. I consider myself a multidisciplinary artist because I'm a performer, but I'm also a writer. But even when you say how with the breath, that is how I write as a performance poet, and it is there, but usually that's for me, and that's for me to know intrinsically. But I love this idea that you're putting this in your book, because now it goes beyond you just sharing your words with your reader. You're sharing your whole method and that process with your reader. So they're literally reading it as you would. So it becomes more of a dance with the readers. That's very beautiful. I was fascinated by that when I saw it. And so I'm actually looking forward to hearing you perform and to present, not perform, to do your reading. Listen to me. Go put on a hat and then, I am not directing this. So I'm going to sit back as you present, and you can introduce your poem to us, what we're about to hear.
Thank you. This is called Poem to My Uterus, and it's after Lucille Clifton. She also wrote a poem called Poem to My Uterus. Poem to My Uterus, after Lucille Clifton. Bright wanderer, homing station set for the gathering, one tiny studded heartbeat. You shed bright blood each monthly turn. I thought I'd trained you, how feeble my attempts to control my body, my worry, and still you barren home, empty of anything resembling family. Each try frozen and fresh, familiar and foreign, anonymous men I chose from glossy catalogs. This one plays basketball. This one plays piano. I bring them all to you, lay them bare, divide my thighs, hoping. But you, stubborn and polyped, pocked with fibroids, ever unwilling, I strive to line you with rich blood. One book says fresh pineapple. One says avocado. I eat whatever magic promises to make you take. Maybe I've ruined you with Accutane or decades of orthotricycline. pummeled the entry to your home with bleached water from public tubs. You, worried carafe, sweet doomed hovel, show me what you need to make a life.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
As it just settles. So I don't want to tell all my business to people listening. But that, that touched me so much. This phase of life that I'm in, and you can put the put it together, I'm at the end of my fertility. And so when I read that, it just resonated with me. It just and Lucille Clifton, can we just say what a wonderful continuance your piece is of her work. She's one of my favorites. And I was recently I was talking to my partner about Lucille Clifton, because he knows that I did a theatrical presentation some years back where she was the narrator of sorts in spirit. And we shared some of her poems in this piece, but I was telling him that her poem, someone compared my work to her because a lot of her things were really short. And I said, because she had a lot of kids. So she had to get time to write and go back to the kids. And so I think of just how your piece just expands on a lot of the favorites that we know of Lucille Clifton, where she talked, and she even said that she talked about body parts, and someone asked her, why you always talk about body parts? And she said, because she likes her, and so you just gave such a beautiful piece, and I'm definitely looking forward to this collection called Yearn. So I would love it, Rage, as we close out, if you could tell us where folks can learn more about you, any news that you would like for us to know about, and be on the lookout for you as we close out, so people can find your beautiful work.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my my website is ragehezekiah.com. And my Facebook is Rage Hezekiah /poet. Those are the two big ways that you can find me. And the book will be out. Yearn will be out with Diode editions in July, and pre-orders will open March 1st, and that'll be available on my website as well. But
that's wonderful. Do you have any events planned for the launch?
Yeah, I have a series of readings. I live in Vermont, so I have a series of readings in the Vermont, Western Mass, New York area, and then a couple of virtual events as well that will be posted on my website. But the events page on my website and on my Facebook are most
be sure to share with us so that we can share with our audience, and folks can check you out. But thank you so much for being part of the Black Writers Studio today. It was such a pleasure to get to meet you and hear your art. Just a lovely pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Khadijah. It's really good talking with you. Thanks for having me.
So